All right, everyone. Welcome into another edition of Ohio State Buckeyes Live. It's number 115 with these three. From the top, Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts 247 Sports. Kevin Noon from Buckeye Grove on Rivals, and Tony Gerdeman from Buckeye Scoop, breaking down Ohio State football with August camp. Just a couple weeks away, and of course, Big Ten Media Days coming up on Thursday and Friday this week. Steve, you've been there a few times, I think.
Yeah, 26 years maybe. I don't know. I'll have to spend a moment and count them up. But the first one I went to was in 1995, and I've been at every one they've ever had. Obviously, they didn't have one last year, so take that one out of the count. But yeah, it's been a good 2.5 decade run here, and looking forward to at least another 2.5 years, maybe. I don't know, but these things, used to be you would go and you'd write a story about the issues in college football. Are they going to have a playoff one day? And, are they going to pay the players one day? And, whatever else is out there. I can't even think what the big issues were back in the 1990s that troubled us so much. But, it was newspapers were a much bigger deal then, and all the newspapers would send somebody, and TV stations, radio stations, and then eventually it kind of transitioned over to websites, and that's kind of where we're at now, is the websites kind of dominate the coverage when you talk about the Athletic nationally and with the team sites they've got. And all of us, the different team sites here in Columbus covering the Buckeyes and ESPN, CBS, and everybody else. And now you're down to maybe one newspaper, really the hometown paper that covers the team, or a major metropolitan daily that's near where the hometown team might be, like Indianapolis for Indiana or that type of thing. So really cut back, really cut down. The TV people, if they do come in, it's maybe in the morning and back out that night. And, that's kind of the way it's been whittled down here. It's not as big a deal perhaps as it used to be, but I'm sure we'll get some insights on what the 2021 season will look like, at least a little bit, as Ohio State chases an unprecedented fifth straight outright Big Ten championship here in 2021.
Folks, leave your comments, your questions, your debate topics in the live chat, although you're probably not going to respond to my plea. It's going to take Steve to get actually into the live chat to ask for questions before people will respond. Kevin, I'm guessing, I'm going to make a guess here, that you don't want Coach speak. We're going to hear Coach speak. We've got all the other conference media days going on, the SEC over the last couple of days, and 90-some% of it, whether it be the players or the coaches, is just a lot of Coach speak. You would like a little more flavor than that, but not necessarily the bombshell that dropped a couple of years ago surrounding Urban Meyer. Maybe you could do without that kind of story breaking this week.
Oh, I mean, don't we want to sell some subscriptions and move some papers and everything else? I mean, but no, it's going to be a lot of Coach speak for certain. I think that the three players that are going for Ohio State are probably getting their final deprogramming. I mean, instructions on what not to say and everything else, and we're going to get some pretty generic answers as to how these players think the upcoming season is going to look. But it's just like the tradition of this going on for however many years for, these conference media days. It's a tradition that 99.9% of the quotes that are dropped are, we could probably predict before we even get to the event. So, it just kind of is what it is. And you just have to kind of go and have kind of a plan set up. And, I don't think any of us go there with the mindset of playing gotcha and trying to, trick anybody into saying anything. But, we certainly are there to tell stories. And, you're going to get exposed if you go in with so do you like playing football type of mentality in terms of the questions. It's going to take some digging. It's going to take some, it's going to take some crafting to come up with some stories. But I know everybody on this panel, this isn't their first rodeo or their 10th rodeo. And, we'll get some good content coming out of this. Are we going to ask them about who's going to be the starting quarterback? Well, I don't know if any of the three of us will. I certainly know of a peer that might be the guy to do that, but we'll figure it out, and we'll be there in case we have that kind of dust up like we had with Brett McMurphy and Urban Meyer a couple of years ago. We'll be there to cover that as well.
Tony, Zach Harrison, Jeremy Ruckert, Thayer Munford, they're the three. What are you looking forward to most regarding Big Ten Media Days and trying to get from your stay in Indianapolis?
I always enjoy, first of all, I'm glad it's in Indianapolis because I much prefer that trip to a Chicago trip, which takes a little bit longer and it's much more congested. And I'm interested to see what it looks like this year because it's going to be taking place in Lucas Oil down on the field there. So, but I always enjoy it because you can just, now granted, there's usually 25 people around Ryan Day and there's anywhere from like 5 to 20 people around the players, but you can get questions in. You can actually, this is going to be a first time talking to anybody in person. Gosh, since this March of 2020, I think, like actually talking to these guys in person. So that'll be good again. And you can go in with story ideas that will, I think in 2015, I went there with, Braxton Miller was moving to receiver. So I wanted to ask defenders from around the Big Ten about it. And the thing is, like, you'll talk to so many players that you may only get 3 good answers. You may get like 10 answers, but only 3 of them are good. So it provides you an opportunity to miss on answers and miss on questions because there's enough quantity to get the quality that you need. And anytime you can just sit and be with Ryan Day or any head coach for an hour and fire back and forth, and it's hard to get questions into Ryan Day because we're all there just firing off stuff. So it can be difficult, but over like the course of an hour, you should, 45 minutes or an hour, I forget which it is, you can generally get what you want. And so there's that opportunity. Plus you learn so much more about where the team is now in terms of just stuff we didn't know from the summer, like who, Ryan Day doesn't like to talk about necessarily who's stepping up, but when he does, it kind of lets you know that something is going on there. And, just we haven't had information in a while. So this is also an opportunity to gain information and then, create content from that, which is something that we all need to do.
Tony, every so often when you guys are running through your media obligations, I smirk because it takes me back to another time. And you stating that about having to ask 6 different players, let's say the weekly Monday or Tuesday news conference, I'm looking for this particular angle. Let's ask all the players that because I'm going to clip that best response out of the 6. Yeah, you got to kind of take that approach to it. No doubt. And Yakov certainly lets us know that by Tony's absence last week, that he was all the rage on Shark Week.
Shark Week is the most, with all apologies, it's so overrated. Sharks are overrated. Octopi are much more interesting than sharks, which basically just cartilage and teeth, and they just swim around. Whereas like octopi can change shapes, change colors, shoot. When are octopuses going to get their week?
It's an interesting take. I can't argue with that.
Yeah, nobody can. Nobody has yet.
We also have Eric Rams here, who just simply enjoys the coverage. So, Eric, we thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. Go Buckeyes. I enjoy all of this group's content. We can't do anything wrong. It's all top flight perfection. Love all the content. Thank you, Eric. I'll remember that basically, we can throw anything out there and it's good.
We just did.
We just did. Yes. Eric, thank you so much for that. Sue's asking a question here that was brought up before we went on live in terms of the absence of Chris Olave at Media Days. Steve, you got anything on that?
I haven't heard anything definitive on why he isn't going. Could be an illness, could be a class conflict, could be anything. Maybe he's got a personal issue that just came up. You just don't know what it could be. You hope for the best and assume it's nothing dramatic. I think Jerry Emig, their sports information director, did seem to indicate it was nothing drastic or nothing major. So don't assume the worst, I guess, on it, and not really that big of a deal, I guess.
I can't imagine that this guy is looking forward to media days. And I'm not talking about the Rod Favre. I'm talking about the Michigan head coach, Jim Harbaugh, because there is a lot there to talk about. He not only has to deal with his football team's disappointments, he has to possibly answer questions or dodge questions or just make the statement that I'm not going to address that from 45 years ago.
Well, yeah, I think the Bo and the doctor thing, I mean, he can share his own personal recollections, I suppose, one time and say, these were my interactions. This is what I know. And make sure, I think, for his own benefit, that he's very consistent if he does go down that road with what he says about that, because you don't want there to be any inconsistencies beyond the fact that he works for the university today. He obviously has no culpability in something that happened 40 years ago or 30 years ago or whatever the dates were alleged. But if he does decide to go down that road, he needs to make sure that he has a consistent explanation of his recollections of what happened and just leave it at that. I mean, that is not what I would expect him to spend a whole lot of time talking about at this event. And in fact, if he even goes down that road, it would be a surprise to me, other than just a quick blanket absolution of Bo Schembechler, his idol and his mentor. So to me, I can't imagine he's going to spend much time on that. But if he does, that's probably how he should handle it. I think with Jim Harbaugh, there are any number of questions. They renegotiated your contract. Why? You were 2-4 last year. Why? Have you decided to finally try? Why or why not? What's happened to your recruiting? Why? What happened to your offense? Why? We thought you were the quarterback whisperer. Why not? Just on and on and on and on. Why haven't you put a quarterback in the NFL yet? Why not? And on and on and on, because he's got 15 or 20 questions that are legitimate questions, and he won't even try to answer any of them. You know that going in. He's just going to give you that blank stare and a 6-word answer that, yeah, we're just going to do everything we can, and we're just going to try as hard as we can, and that's all we can do. Just I don't know. I don't know. It speaks volumes that they're picked 4th in the media preseason poll in the Eastern Division. That's as low as they've ever been picked, probably in the history of the sport, in that, in the Big Ten or in a division. And then secondly, they're not in their traditional position at number 15 in the preseason polls. Some of the magazines don't even have them in the top 25, and Phil Steele had them clear down around number 60. So that'll tell you what people really believe of the bang-up job he's done. Everybody who's on that roster was brought there by him. He's in his 6th or 7th year now, 7th year. So everybody who was brought there by him. So he's got a lot of questions to answer on how he's driven this thing directly in the ground, and Rich Rodriguez like. So I don't know. He's gonna have his hands full, I think, with this. But I wouldn't look for him to get any answers out of him.
Yeah, I think Steve has hit upon a lot of the points of where they're at right now, and where Jim Harbaugh is in terms of maybe being a little aloof to questions and criticisms and things along those natures, and that Michigan certainly isn't being well thought of in terms of the national rankings. And I had an opportunity to break bread with several writers over the weekend, and we talked about Michigan, and just went through. It's like, who are the stars on this team? Where would the shock come from? Where would they be able to overperform based on what it is that we think that we're all looking at? And while we're able to name a couple of nice players, I don't think that we were really able to sit there and say, well, they're really dug in on a system that seems to be working. Oh, they've got longtime position coaches. Oh, they've got a philosophy that seems to be working. Oh, that they've got a coach that isn't like one of the oddest cats that I've ever seen in my life. That's all part of the situation. And I don't know. There's just sometimes a point where you kind of know what's coming, and while you're hoping for the best, you kind of are bracing for impact. And I think there are a lot of people in Ann Arbor that are bracing for impact right now, because I don't know. I picked, a couple weeks ago, last week, 2 weeks ago, I went and did my brackets of how I saw the East and West going, and I had Michigan fourth. Maybe they could win another game that I'm not expecting, but they very easily could lose 2 games that I'm expecting them to win. I mean, it's a middling crapshoot for them. This is not a team that I see going off there and shocking the world and going 10-2. We're going to know very quickly against Washington what this team is made of. And truthfully speaking, I don't think a lot of people think a whole lot about the Pac-12. They could go and beat the Huskies, and then they could still go and get boat raced in the Big Ten. So, it's certainly going to be a difficult situation. And I don't think that Jim Harbaugh is really looking forward to the national media, to the Ohio State media, maybe to a couple of other programs, to come in and ask him questions that have not been scrubbed and sanitized, because that's the price of doing business up north in terms of having any sort of access to Schembechler Hall. So I'm expecting a really awkward media exchange, and I'm really expecting there to be somebody in there playing gatekeeper who might sit there and interject and keep tough questions from really getting all the way to Jim Harbaugh, because he doesn't have a lot to bank on right now. And if he comes out there and pulls a D- performance at Big Ten Media Days, it's just going to add to the tremendous weight that's on him right now.
Way back when, I had to stop watching The Office because it made me cringe and I just wasn't enjoying it. That's what this is going to be when Jim Harbaugh is up at the front podium. It's just going to be uncomfortable and cringing because he doesn't respond well to criticism. And right now, every question that he's going to get asked is going to be laced with some sort of criticism. And so it'll be interesting to see how he handles that, knowing how he's always handled it in the past. Maybe he changes, and maybe this is a new Jim Harbaugh. I don't think we have any indication that will be the case or can be the case. And I remember a few years back, I tried talking to him when he was off, because they do the podium, and then a little bit later in the day, they do their 1 hour session at a table, and you could just walk up and go ask questions. And, I stood there for a few minutes, and it's not a productive question and answer session with him. It's a question, and maybe there's an answer, or maybe it's, there's some contentiousness there, and it's short, and you don't learn anything from talking to him. And that was when they were still doing okay. And so I have no idea what he's going to be like now, where, everybody's going to be like, well, how is this doing? Your defensive line's not deep. Is it going to be okay? And everything is just got this negativity to it in terms of people wanting to know about his team. So I assume I don't know if I'll ask him anything, just because it's not, it could just be not a productive attempt, but I may stop by and listen to what he has to say at times. But it's really, I don't want to rubberneck that whole situation. And that kind of feels like what you're doing. And just, you're driving by and you're looking at the white sheet being put over his head. And it's, that's not my scene, man.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things about it is he works himself into these situations where people are asking him tough questions, and then he tries to do this half-assed deflection, well, Urban Meyer, everywhere he's ever been, there's drama or something. I mean, you couldn't beat Urban Meyer on your best day, bud. Recruiting, football, tiddlywinks, and you're trying to impugn the reputation of Urban Meyer. It's like he's just flailing at something to grasp a hold of, and throws that out there 2 or 3 years ago in the midst of that Zach Smith situation or whatever that was. And it's just no, bro, you ain't getting it. You have no credibility to stand on to talk about anybody else because you don't win football games. You don't win important football games. You haven't won important football games since you were the coach at Stanford or the 49ers. So, you have nothing to stand on. You have no credibility.
We hopefully have some credibility. I guess I do by connection with these three: Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts, Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop, and of course Kevin Noon from Buckeye Grove on Rivals. There he is down below. All right, talking Ohio State football with you. I'm sifting through the comments and the questions, and to answer one, I believe I mentioned that Zach Harrison, Jeremy Ruckert, Thayer Munford are the reps for the Buckeyes there at Big Ten Media Days. All right, Kevin, I'm going to start with you on this question. This is kind of my question of the week that hit me a couple days ago in talking some Florida State football, that if any of us could ask one question or be delivered one fact, one stat, one piece of information that would give us the best indication of how that particular football team, this being the Buckeyes, of course, would finish conclude the season, what piece of information, what question would you ask that would give you the best take on Ohio State this season?
Will any players get lost on the way to the stadium? If that doesn't happen, they're going 12-0. Period. I don't need to go with a lot of explanation, but they're going to be a double-digit favorite in every game this season. I don't want to speak the I word into existence. So, basically just making sure that player welfare is fine and that nobody gets lost on the way to the stadium. I don't know if I'm going to see a team coming off of a shortened season, a season that was canceled and brought back and shortened and had the rivalry game canceled and everything else and ended with the disappointment of losing in the championship game. I don't know if I see an Iowa or a Purdue happening there. I think as long as Ohio State shows up and all 85 scholarship players are there on every Saturday, barring the first week, which is a Thursday, I think they should be fine. So, maybe I'm being just a little too fun and a little too whimsical with my answer, but as soon as we talked about it in the pre-show meeting, that was the first thing that came to mind, and I'm not moving off of it.
Tony.
Show me the interception statistics for the Ohio State defense, because in 2014 they averaged over 1.6 per game. 2016 they averaged over 1.6 per game. 2019 about 1.1 per game. If they're around 1.5 per game, that would make me feel really good about the secondary and this defense as a whole, because I think that's maybe that's what will separate them from 12-0 and 15-0, that sort of thing, or 13-0 and 15-0, where do they have the defense to hold up? Do they have a playmaking secondary like they did in 2016, like they did in 2019? Are they in 2014, of course, with Von Bell and those guys? And so if they have that, if you can tell me that, and they're at like 1.5 or 1.6 interceptions per game, I'm going to feel really good about this team's chances of winning it all, knowing that you still have to outscore everybody, and this is an offensive game. But also, if you can break serve a couple of times against the best offenses, then maybe your 42 points will beat their 35.
So if that second bit of information, Tony, I gave you was that they picked off Noah Vedral 7 times, and that skewed the average.
Well, I mean, that's probably factored. I'm sure that happened in 2014 and 2016 as well. Like, how many times did they pick off Wilton Spate? I mean, sometimes you have, sometimes you skew the stats with one bad quarterback.
Steve.
Yeah, my stat, as I pick out my Phil Steele book, in the last, he's got 7 years worth of stats here. And generally every year, Ohio State is between 98 and 150 yards allowed on the ground, and usually it's closer to 120. So they're usually one of the best teams in the country rush defense, and I think that'll probably continue just because that's so ingrained in what they do. But I think last year, the defensive passing yardage number got all the way up to 304 yards per game. And we saw, let's see, Indiana 491, Clemson 400, and Alabama 464. Those numbers seemed to me be a little bit out of whack. So my number is, if they can hold the opposing offense to, let's say, most of these years they're under 200 yards allowed. They're right around in the 180s to 190s in passing. If they can hold, let's just be conservative and say if they can hold the opposing offense to 240 yards passing, I would consider that to be a major step forward in improvement. That's one whole touchdown drive, basically less per game, let's just say. So I'm going to say, are they going to be under split the middle, under 235 yards passing allowed per game? That to me is a big indicator, because what that'll tell us is, yeah, they did a great job against the bad teams, probably held them to 100 or 150, and kept the good teams probably under 300, which is important. So to me, that'd be kind of what I would look at.
I was
Mark,
pretty astounded this week. Oh, go ahead, Tony.
I just throw another one in there. Let
Absolutely.
me know the combined sack numbers for Zach Harrison and Tyreek Smith, because if it's 4, I'm concerned. If it's 20, look out.
Makes total sense. Kevin, I expected no less out of you. Steve, Tony, I expected no less out of you. That's you guys all delivered in your own way. Very nice. I appreciate those. I think they were very insightful in their responses. And if you checked out Kevin Noon's Big Ten predictions, whether that be on our show or on Buckeye Grove, they're right in line with the comment that he just made a few minutes ago regarding how he sees the Big Ten. I jumped the gun a little bit on this. So we got our folks at tristatesketch.com, and they surprised me with this recently. And so that's a sketch that they put on wood, and I didn't know that this was coming. So they sketched that for me and a few other things and said, hey, Mark, do you like our work? And so absolutely, and gave me about 8 or 10 examples. So what you do is you grab a photo that you like, you send it to the folks there at tristatesketch.com, and you select your design, both with the photo and what you would like it placed on, and they do some tremendous work. And again, I've seen 10 or 12 examples of it, and it's pretty astonishing how accurate their sketches are. So check out their work there at tristatesketch.com. All right, we've got a question that came in from the Rod Farva concerning Kevin. He had asked earlier about Jaheim Singletary in particular, and just whether any update on his status, but also overall just looking at the recruiting landscape and whether we expect any commits soon.
Well, as for Jaheim Singletary, I mean, you're going to have to recruit him up until the final second. Do I feel that he's on his way out of the class? No. But do I feel like Ohio State can just sit there and be like, we're good, and do a weekly Zoom call with them and that's it? No, I think that they're going to have to keep fighting, but that's what happens when you recruit on a national footprint. You're going to have to keep doing those types of things, and it's not like there's no gentleman's agreement, be it in the Big Ten or be it nationally. So it's not like, well, you are committed somewhere, so we're going to honor that and leave you alone. Ohio State is one of the schools that goes out there and does a great job flipping kids when it wants to flip a kid. So I expect nothing less than other schools to try and do the same, but Ohio State being Ohio State doesn't necessarily open the door outside of for maybe that hometown school or an Alabama. So Jaheim Singletary, too early to tell. As for just the timing on recruits, we're going to be getting to a barbecue here at the end of the month where some kids are going to be on campus. CJ Hicks is going to be there because if it's a recruiting possibility, CJ Hicks is just going to be there. He loves doing that type of stuff. I mean, he's going to recruit the star wide receiver or maybe the star botanist who's looking at Ohio State on an academic scholarship. It's just what CJ Hicks does. Watch out, Pantone, because CJ Hicks will be coming for your job here at some point. we're not talking about anybody about a date, especially after Trayon Webb. We knew his date was coming up and he committed to Oklahoma. You have Addison Russell, who's got a date, I think, coming up. I know he got down to a 3. Belief is that Ohio State probably not in that lead spot. So, I don't know if we're going to have to sit there and, as a recruiting industry, sit and wait a long time. But I don't think that anything is imminent at this point. But some kids do a better job of just up and committing out of the blue, and those are always the fun ones. And other ones are like, I'm committing at XYZ All-Star game, and those are fine too. But unless I've just not been following along closely enough, I don't have anybody on the short term.
Yeah, and it's not totally unusual that there are no commitments at this point. And keep in mind the 2023 guys, some of them have not been to any schools yet, so they're finally getting a chance to visit places and see what other schools have to offer. So that's going to slow some things down. But in 2017 or 2019, there were no 2021 commits at this point, and so it's not totally unusual that things are quiet, or I shouldn't say quiet. Things are never quiet, but that there are no commitments at this point. But they will be coming. If you build it, they will come. Steve,
you're muted, Steve.
Yep. I asked our people if they had anything imminent in terms of verbals, and they didn't seem to feel like there was anything coming down the pipeline real quick. But with practice starting, for a lot of these kids in 10 days on August the 1st, some of them may want to get that out of the way with the idea that, hey, if I get hurt, at least my spot has been preserved at the top school that I want to go to. So that sometimes can enter their feeling a little bit, or their thought. As Kevin said, guys are coming to campus, and it's possible somebody could just get that urge while they're there that day, if they get the hard sell, to say, yeah, I'm coming. So, things happen. But as those guys said, the focus is now turning back to actual football, as opposed to worrying a whole lot about recruiting visits, at least until you get into the game schedule. And so I think that for a lot of these guys, that's kind of more their thought, even though this is somewhat of an unorthodox year with the lack of visits up until June 1st.
We got 73 on the line. Appreciate everybody being here. Please like the videos. So before you settle in, listen to the conversation, please like the video, share the videos out on social media. Just flat out let people know that we're here every week talking Ohio State football, typically on Wednesday, needed to go on Tuesday. These guys are headed off to Indianapolis for Big Ten Media Days. That's what makes it important in regards to subscribing to the channel, hitting that bell for the notifications to know when we go live. And Steve, I believe people at this time of year also have the urge to spend a little money and make a few bets regarding over-unders. Kevin unveiled his Big Ten predictions last week on this show, and also you can catch them on Buckeye Grove. My predictions are right there. If you can make them out, that's them right there. And so those are being unveiled video by video. So Virginia's released today. So everybody's going to, I'm expecting at least 500,000 views on the Virginia predictions video. So that's going to be a big one. So anyway, they're right there. We know that Kevin's expecting the Buckeyes to limp through the season. So 10.5 Yakov. Let's hear from Tony and Steve. What is your typical prediction mode of approach of when do they get unveiled and in what manner, Tony?
I am currently in the middle of my Big Ten position rankings, and I go through and rank all the defensive line in the East, and then the West and all of that stuff, and then I tally them all up, and whoever has like the lowest scores is the best. Ends up being my two predictions for the Big Ten championship game, and so that's usually what I do. I don't necessarily do sometimes I guess I do if I need to crank something out. I would do a record prediction, but I haven't in a while. But I would definitely go over on the 10.5. I think the better question is 11.5, and I would probably there's no reason not to go over that because they're going to be double-digit favorites every single game in the regular season. So if you're going to give me either of those, I'm definitely going on the over. And when I sit down and like if I were to if I look at the schedule, I'm looking for the road games. That's the first thing I'm looking for. Like what are the tough road games? And that's pretty much how I base my predictions on, because good teams should win every game at home, and then you see what happens on the road games, and that's where the record shakes out for me.
Yeah, I'm of a mind that over 10.5 seems like a mortal lock to me. I don't know how to qualify that, or I mean, I agree with what everybody's saying. I think they're heavy favorites in every game that they play, but again, they could lose one game just because they're playing a young quarterback or the defense doesn't come around. So, which game could it be? Maybe at Indiana if Penix gets hot and they can't slow him down. And they're trading touchdowns and have a late turnover, you lose the game, So I don't know. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think that could ever happen in our lifetime, that they would lose to Indiana. I guess I was a young man the last time it happened. I was 20 I was 20 years old. It was 1988 or 89, I guess. So, yeah, I would have been 21 in 89. So, at any rate, yeah, I'm of a mind that anything can happen, but I mean, I think that with the talent level that they have stacked up there, it's almost unthinkable that they would lose more than one game. So I think over 10.5 is as safe a bet as you'd see out there. And, are they going to win the national championship? Well, who are they playing in the playoff? I think that's the first question you have to answer. Are there upsets everywhere? And does somebody who's never been to the playoff get in there? That's a question. Although, with LSU, they'd never been in the playoff before. They just happened to have the best team and the best player the one year, and they breezed through it. But I don't know. It is interesting to think. I mean, this is a potential national championship team, no doubt about it. But in my way of thinking, a lot of things got to click into place for something like that to happen.
Sue, thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. We appreciate that. Sue had asked about how to contribute, and other people got to her in the Super Chat. So I also appreciate the people that answered her question on how to contribute. Sue has been a faithful viewer for quite a period of time, not like years and years and years, but she has been locked in on these shows for, I would say, the last 6 months or so. And so, Sue, thank you so much for that. I want to reiterate to everyone that the Super Chat's available. Also, if you want to bypass that for certain reasons, you can go to PayPal, Venmo, or Cash App. I ask that if you do that, I appreciate that. But just if you want to contribute to this specific show, that you make note of that. So thank you so much for that. We typically have 2,000 to 3,000 views on these shows. Obviously, it's more like 50, 60, 80 people in the chat at one time. So we would appreciate anything that you could do in regards to valuing the contribution that we have from three of the very best. And for somebody who earlier had stated 2 doses of Kevin Noon on the same day, jackpot. So, Kevin, let us know where else we can find you.
Yeah, at BuckeyeGrove.com. You can find me there, generally hanging out in the Horseshoe Lounge. And we've been upping our video content as well over at Buckeye Grove Video. And, of course, you can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Noon. And lastly, you can probably find me out on my smoker cooking either a brisket or a pork butt. That's where I seem to be the most. And I'm finding out that maybe the culinary arts should have talked to me about 10 years ago, because I sure do enjoy it. But otherwise, you can find me generally on one of these shows or over at Buckeye Grove.
We were over at Kev's house and had some brisket the other day, and it was out of this world. So
nice.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing with the brisket. So, yep, a lot of fun.
What do you have going on these days?
Well, I'm going to pack up tomorrow and head to Indianapolis for the Big Ten Media Days, and really looking forward to that, and really seeing a lot of the people that you haven't seen for, maybe a year or two, depending on which school. And we saw some people at the Big Ten tournament, and others, it's been a little while longer. So a lot of our old friends from across the different schools are going to be there, you would think. And first time it's ever going to be held in Indianapolis, which is different. And they really haven't held a lot of these Big Ten preseason events. They had the basketball event there for at least a few years back in the 90s, which made sense because it was a better town for it to get the better coverage. But and really to get Bobby Knight to show up, it was an easier thing for him to get to than to expect him to schlep all the way to Chicago. But at any rate, I am excited. We always love going to Indianapolis, and should be a fun couple days there. And then that's it. We're going to get ready for the start of the preseason camp here in a week or so, and before we know it, we'll be into the weekly grind. So that's what's coming up. Bucknuts.com and at Steve Hellwagon on Twitter.
Tony.
Yeah, Media Day is pretty much the beginning of the football season for us, and then camp is right after it. So yeah, you can find me at BuckeyeScoop.com. My podcast, the Buckeye Weekly podcast, me and Tom Orr. We have not recorded anything this week, but we will probably get a couple of shows in this week in Indianapolis, and then eventually we'll be doing like 3 or 4 shows a week when everything is firing and happening. So looking forward to that. You can find me on Twitter at Tony Gerdeman, and here Wednesdays around 2 every week.
So don't be fooled by that. Tuesday because of the travel day for the Big Ten Media Days, but typically Wednesdays at 2 Eastern, everybody, and bring a couple friends with you. So we typically see anywhere from 70 to 100, I would say, at any one time in the live stream. Let's ramp up those numbers. Just bring some other folks that love Ohio State football. We've got other fan bases represented here as well. All right. I should be keeping better track of the time. What do we got here? We've got about 15 minutes. Very nice. So I asked this question before we started to record, and I'm waiting for the responses now. Here we go. Let's start with Kevin. So Kevin, Minnesota, Thursday night on the road, game number 1. Let's take the quarterback out of play because we all see what he does every play. Across the field, offense and defense. We give you an ISO camera on one player to watch for the entire game. Who are you most interested in watching?
While there are other position groups that I'm more concerned about, I think my ISO camera is on Zach Harrison because I want to see what year 3 looks like for him. I want to see, really based on what the line is around him, if Zach Harrison is going to be, if he's going to be able to put it all together. Comes in as a 5-star recruit, certainly has a few moments where he flashes, but doesn't have the consistency that people certainly, fairly or unfairly put on, with these expectations on him. So I really want to see him coming out of the gate, we've heard some positive things about the light bulb going on, but what does that look like when he's not lining up against either scarlet or white jerseys here in Columbus? What does that look like on the road in a conference game? Is that step going to be taken? Because a lot of people are going to want to talk about Jack Sawyer or JT Tuimoloau or guys like that. But I think so much of the success of the line is going to be predicated on what Zach Harrison's going to do. So that's where my eye is going to be drawn first.
Who do you really want to see, Steve? You're on mute.
I do that because I type a lot during what time I'm off, so I didn't want the typing to come across. I would think 2 of the guys that would be fun to watch every play would be Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, just to get that idea as technicians, what they're doing at the line of scrimmage. How are their discards at the line of scrimmage? How's their get off to get away from a defender? What are they doing to on comeback routes? What are they doing on go routes? What are they doing, on all the different routes that they're going to run, and how proficient are they at what they're doing? We think they're 2 of the best in the country, but it would be fun just to have an isolation camera on one or both of those guys, just to see what Minnesota is going to try and do to keep them under wraps. Alabama succeeded quite a bit, I thought, with Chris Olave. Maybe not quite as much with Garrett Wilson in that game, but I thought they kept Olave under wraps. But I want to see, what those guys would do. And then over on defense, I might say Seven Banks just because it's an important year. It's a contract year for him at cornerback, and they really need him to be the lead dog and everything he's advertised at. But if we assume maybe Cameron Brown wins the other cornerback position, might be fun to watch him in this game to see, is he really the answer at that other cornerback position? Because if not, they're going to have some major problems. Could be Ryan Watts or Lejon Cavazos or, I don't know, Martinez, or goodness knows who it could be. Maybe one of the true freshmen, J.K. Johnson. I don't know. But just the thought that just some of the guys who they're really going to be depending on to be critical playmakers, either offense or defense. But maybe that other corner is probably the one that's going to be the most curious, I think, in that first game.
When you presented this question to us, my first two thoughts were like Zach Harrison and Cameron Brown. But the more I think about it, I'm going to go with Josh Proctor at free safety, because this defense doesn't operate without a free safety who can be calm and be a Jordan Fuller type. You don't, as I always say, you don't have to be Malik Hooker. Just be as good as Jordan Fuller and just keep the play in front of you. So I would like to see how much is Josh Proctor being treated like a yo-yo by Tanner Morgan. It's a veteran quarterback. They do a lot of play action because they have the running back for that. So how much is Josh Proctor being pulled in and then having to, tear off behind him for something deep to like a Chris Altman Bell, talented Minnesota receivers. So I want to see how much control Josh Proctor has back there. We saw last year with guys like Marcus Williamson and Marcus Hooker, where they were not, they would almost, there were times they almost got to the line of scrimmage, it seemed like, before they realized that it was a pass. And so they got bossed around by the quarterbacks last year. And I want to see Josh Proctor take control of that position, because it's the position he was brought to Ohio State to play. He didn't get a chance to do that last year. That position needs to be settled. And if he can do it, that's what I'm going to be looking to see on that Thursday night.
So you make a valid point about possibly having more viewers at a different time of the day, but we pull everyone together when we can. And so I think you can understand that with four of us trying to schedule time. And certainly more people are at work during the day. But man, when I can throw these guys like six figures someday, when the Voice of College Football Network is just flowing, then they'll be on demand. But right now, they tell me when to show up, and I'm like, yes, sir, because I will do anything to reel these three in every week. So we're just happy to have them at any time. And BGPO Football Funk, that's DeAndre. Thank you so much for the contribution. He consistently contributes to what we do here. So it's good to have you, Mr. Clemson fan, on board. Right. Kevin, I'm going to hit you with this question, even though it's a bit off of the Ohio State path. It was asked in the chat concerning USC in Southern California, where they've always had it locked down, and California has been a top 3 state in recruiting. It's declining, still great talent there, but declining down the ranks. Georgia can certainly make a claim for that 3 or 4 spot now. In Florida, Miami, Florida State, doing a decent job of recruiting, but still not locking down the state as they once did and getting the very best. Ohio State goes in there, of course. Those 4 programs kind of brought to the forefront as not locking down their areas as they once did. Do you have any theories on why that's the case?
Well, because you can't lock down Florida and California. The gift of hindsight, you sit there and you're like, well, you obviously didn't get the right 20 guys from your state. But, at the time, maybe you felt that you were getting the right 20 guys from the state. And that's not to say that necessarily SC is going out and landing the top 20 guys that it wants to land, because Clay Helton's tenure there is tenuous at best. And there's just a lot going on in terms of that. And then with the state of Florida, just the sheer number of kids there, once again, it's a case of hindsight, and you can't get them all. So it's a difficult proposition, because it's a lot easier, I think, for like Ohio State to lock Ohio down, because you're going to have 4 to 6 of your top guys that are going to be from Ohio. Then you're going to have a middle section, and then you've got a section that is there that kind of, replenishes a lot of Big Ten teams, replenishes Cincinnati, Kentucky, some programs like that. So when you're only having to sit there and focus maybe on really being dialed in on 15, 20 players at the beginning of a cycle, I'm talking 2 years out, your hit rate's going to be a lot higher than SC is going to be in California, or any of the big 3, 4, 5, however you want to designate the power structure in the state of Florida these days, is going to be there just due to sheer numbers. So, I don't think that there's any one thing that's necessarily contributing to it. I mean, I got an idea. SC, win some games. FSU, win some games. Show that you can develop players. I mean, all of that stuff. But that's going to be true at any school in terms of recruiting any territory. That's not a unique issue that you're running into in trying to protect your home turf. Maybe you just have to do a little bit better job of evaluation, but so much of that is skewed until you sit there and you look back at what hindsight tells you after the fact.
Tone?
I just think there's the winning is a huge aspect of that, and USC has fallen off, and FSU has fallen off, and there are so many great places to play now. I mean, you're seeing Oklahoma goes into Florida every year and gets a couple of kids, and they got they may have 2 of the top Florida kids in 2023 by the end of the cycle, and there's just so many places to go now, and the world is so much more open to these guys, and they're seeing more, and there's so much more money involved in terms of the facilities and things like that. So there's just different opportunities, and you can go farther from home. And really, you look at the Florida kids, and like the Miami kids look to stay in Miami, but not necessarily any other kids. If they do, it's, that's their choice. It's just like there's no real region anymore where it's hard to get these guys to leave. And so there's, that's the fault of the schools, I think, in not maintaining the level that they once had, which Ohio State has been able to do. And you have no in-state competition there. And, it's just what you do. And still Ohio State is having trouble, locking up Lorenzo, Sonny Styles in 2023. And so you can still, with the perfect storm coming on at near schools or other schools, they can still come in and take Ohio's best. And we've seen, it doesn't always happen, but it has happened. And so even Ohio and Ohio State, there's no fence around it. But then once you get out to California, Texas, Florida, there's, you just think it's almost herding cats with, fences that have big holes in them. You can't keep everybody inside. They're going to get out.
Yeah. In Texas with Tom Herman, it didn't work out. And as we said, I joked, last week or the week before, I didn't know who the Texas coach was because they've been through so many of them since Mac Brown, because nobody can succeed in recruiting Texas and keeping the best players there to contend. And I think that's the big thing. And I think it's endemic of what's happened with USC and UCLA and Florida State and Miami, and there's just cracks in the wall in all these places. And Ohio State's been one of the main exploiters of it. When you look at some of the great players out of Texas that the Buckeyes have gotten, like J.K. Dobbins and Quinn Ewers coming up and different guys over the years, it all just kind of works out. So to my way of thinking, it's a relationship business, and Ohio State's got some of the best recruiters in the country right now. with Larry Johnson, with Brian Hartline, with some of the other guys that have locked in national top 50, national top 20 guys. And those are the guys that you contend and win championships with. So to me, it's something that just perpetuates itself.
You guys will get your limited shot at Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren this week, as will everyone else. So it's a bit of a shared situation, and you only get a slice there, possibly. Steve, I'll start with you. If you could sit him down one-on-one, considering everything that's happened over the past year and a half and everything that faces this conference on and off the field and NIL and everything else, whatever interests you and whatever you feel is compelling, what would you really like to hear out of him?
I think you could come up with a list of 100 questions for Kevin Warren. Are you regretting the fact you took this job? I think that'd be kind of the first one out of the box. When you were being pilloried from, post to post last year, did you regret that you took this job and put yourself out there for this type of ridicule and abuse? And how difficult was that stretch? And why did you unilaterally make this decision? It seemed to cancel football only to relent and go back on it with some kind of halfway type season that didn't really seem to serve anybody's best interests. And beyond that, I think that if anybody really wants to put his feet to the fire, the email that came out with President Johnson from Ohio State and her conversation with Gene Smith, that she had communication with Kevin Warren, and he questioned the authenticity of the reaction of the Ohio State parents to not having the season, whether they were truly genuine in their feelings about that. I don't know who the hell he thinks he is to question somebody's motives or thoughts. And I think that that's one, if somebody really wanted to put his feet to the fire, that came out in a FOIA request. Ohio State provided that to the media, that she had said that in an email to Gene Smith or a text or some type of a conversation, that he was questioning the motives of the parents of the Ohio State players who only had the best interests of their kids at heart. So that to me is one that's going to be hard to walk back. And not only that, he's the parent of a college athlete. I am just dumbfounded that he, in some type of communication with President Johnson, made some kind of assertion that the Ohio State parents were being disingenuous with their reaction to wanting to play football and wanting to see their kids have their season that they've trained for over, their entire lives. And a lot of them, their entire professional life kind of depended upon it. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Very disappointing when you hear and see things like that of somebody who's supposed to be in a leadership position. And, as I said, that's probably about 7 or 8 questions right there that I would start with, but I could come up with another 60 or 70 probably pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm not afraid to ask the direct questions or whatnot, but I would like one interview to turn into a second one at some point, so I probably wouldn't go right in on him. I'm only a tough guy on here. I'm really just, very, very passive normally, but I probably would ask him for a self-evaluation. Your year plus one in or whatnot. How would you evaluate the job that you've done? I mean, what decisions, what things have you done? Would you sit there and say would be the greatest accomplishments of the Warren regime in the Big Ten, and what would you like to have handled differently? And just kind of let it go from there, and then be able to follow up, as I just had a light go out, follow up from that and see where it goes, because he's somebody who hasn't done much media except with a selected few national media types.
Sympathetic.
So I certainly don't want to come right in adversarial, but open the door, get him talking, and then really be able to kind of see what his view is about how he feels that he's done, because I think you could learn a lot there. Certainly Ohio State fans, certainly most Big Ten football fans were not in favor with the way that COVID was handled in terms of the season, This will not be revisited. Okay, this will be revisited. We're starting the season late, so on and so forth. But, I think his answer might give us a lot of insight as to how he grades himself.
Yeah, and the key to asking questions is you want to ask questions that get answers. So that narrows the questions way down to Kevin Warren, because you're only, he's not going to answer everything you ask, or you have to ask the right way. And I'm with Kevin. I would be like, what did you do right last year? What do you think you did wrong? Looking in just retrospect. And another question would be, why did you cancel, or why was the season canceled when it was, rather than just being a little bit more patient? Another question would be, do you regret canceling that or scrapping that August 5th schedule and not just playing that? Would that schedule have been better for the conference than what was eventually then set forth? So, stuff like that, where you're not throwing him under the bus, you're allowing him to explain himself in ways that maybe he didn't last year, and without, and you just let him use his own words to tell you why he made the wrong choices, or why those wrong choices happened, or why he was part of making them, and just, let him explain himself, and without, why did you do this or why did you do that? Just ask him. I'm asking him your thoughts on different aspects of last year. And, if he can't look back on it and see areas that he could have done things better, then the Big Ten is in trouble. So you better look back on things you've done and find ways to improve. We all have to, and we're not running the entire Big Ten. I mean, and then, something that, would never be asked or never be answered for sure is, how do you live this down? Because look at I've said this before somewhere else, look at all of the great things Jim Delaney has done for the Big Ten, starting the Big Ten Network and just bringing them millions and millions. He's still laughed at for legends and leaders. So he can't live that down. How in the world is Kevin Warren going to live this down when all he can do is keep making the Big Ten a bunch of money, and this is still what he'll always be remembered for?
You build a million bridges, but you have one legends and leaders, and that's what you're remembered for. Mm-hmm. I know that saying doesn't quite go that way, but at any rate, my one thought on this is he would do well to channel his inner Jim Delaney and go back and watch some of his previous Big Ten Media Day appearances, because if there's a 30-minute window, what Jim Delaney was the absolute master of was spending 20 minutes talking about everything under the sun connected with the Big Ten Conference. And there's plenty of stuff out there like name, image, and likeness, the future of the NCAA, the playoff with 12 teams and his thoughts on that and their input on that, what happened last year, the COVID protocols that they're still going to endure this year. They're great television partners. What the Big Ten Network means to the world. You could fill about 19 and a half minutes of filibuster with that, and then have your PR director find your 4 or 5 very sympathetic people that they turned to last year to shield him from rocks and debris. And they got one-on-ones, the Thamels and the 40s and the Dodds and the Arbachs and those people all got their little one-on-one, that because they knew the Chicago Tribune got one, maybe Teddy Greenstein, even though he doesn't work there anymore. He works for a gambling site now, I guess. But, they really went out of their way to protect that guy last year when the proverbial poop hit the fan, and he was insulated and got softball questions only as John Browdy stood over Tony Perez's shoulder, and Marge Schott had been suspended, and it was baseball questions only. Steve Snap standing over somebody's shoulder football questions only whenever stuff was going down at Ohio State with the NCAA. So, yeah, it sure will have a lot of that type stuff.
We've put this together for 115 consecutive weeks. Thanks to these three, I learn something every week, get entertained, informed. It's insightful. They always deliver. So we hope you appreciate it as well. We should be back next Wednesday at 2:00 Eastern time. If not, we'll be back sometime next week. So hit that bell for the notifications to know when we're going live. Kevin Noon, Buckeye Grove, Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts, Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop. Follow them all right there. And we will be back next week. Guys, I appreciate it.
Yep.
Thanks.
Take care, everybody.
Yep.